Super Mario Bros. The name itself is synonymous with the entire games industry. Like probably a third of the population, the very first game I ever played was a Mario game, specifically Super Mario World for the Super Nintendo. Despite being born nearly a decade after its release, the Super Nintendo was responsible for ushering me into the world of gaming nearly 25 years ago.
Man, has it really been that long?
Phew. Oh, sorry about that. That sort of thing starts to happen once you're nearing your 30s. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right, Mario. 28 might make me feel old, but that's nothing for everyone's favorite plumber. Now, Mario's been around for almost as long as video games themselves, making his arcade debut back in 1981's Donkey Kong, a game I plan on covering when I talk about the Big Ape himself. For now, I'd like to start with Mario's first real game. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, today we're talking Mario Bros. What, you expected something more super? Nah. Before we get there, we gotta pay our respects to our main man Mario's first arcade outing. Alright, time to play us some Mario Bros. For those who aren't in the know, Mario Bros was released in 1983 back in the arcades and would later be ported to the Nintendo Entertainment System a few years later. The game, of course, was in part designed by Nintendo's prodigal son himself, Shigeru Miyamoto. But, as is often the case, Miyamoto wasn't alone. As it turns out, legendary Nintendo veteran Gunpei Yokoi would also help out with designing. And if you somehow haven't heard of Yokoi, you've definitely heard of some of his more popular creations, like, oh, I don't know, how about the Game Boy? Yeah, talk about a killer design team. Sounds like they were really firing on all cylinders on this one, huh? Well, let's take a look at what the combination of Nintendo's, at the time, two best designers were capable of. In Mario Bros., your objective is simple. In order to win, all you've got to do is clear the stage of all enemies. Unfortunately for you, this sewer is absolutely crawling with all manner of aquatic adversaries. We've got crabs, these weird little fly things, and most notably, turtles, according to the manual. Yeah, here we've got the birth of one of the most iconic enemies in video games. And like usual, taking them out shouldn't be too hard. You just jump right here, and not so fast, bucko. As strange as it is to say, and as wrong as it feels, in this game, Mario doesn't jump on turtles. You can't, actually. See? Watch. Ooh, sorry, Mario. Anyway, it might feel strange at first, but to be honest, the inability to pounce on enemies actually makes Mario Bros. Far more unique and memorable than it otherwise would have been. Since you can't kill enemies from above, your only option is to strike from below. When doing so, you can flip enemies onto their backs, which then lines them up for a well-placed field goal. Here, Mario, allow me. Consider us even for earlier. As I was saying, the slower, more methodical means of attacking enemies lends Mario Bros. An almost puzzle-like quality, something that would come to stand out from the athletic, high-speed gameplay Mario would later be known for. Either way, it doesn't stop the game from being a simple, fun time waster. It's got a fun gameplay loop, and nice enough graphics and sound for its time. One thing I always really liked is the simple animation that plays when you bonk your head against these platforms. Something about the way it stretches, it almost breaks that pixel art illusion to me. I don't know, I just always found it really satisfying. But you want to talk satisfying? This game introduces the POW block. What's a POW block? Well, it's right there in the name, POW! Just like that. Hitting this will flip every enemy in the room, making it a super invaluable tool. There's also these fireballs that just fly by. They're not much of a threat or anything, but it is kind of fun to see how this is where the fire flower would come from in later games. Oh, and these ice guys who freeze platforms and are probably better known as the item in Smash Bros. Than an enemy in Mario Bros. They're cool though, I like the way that they impact the stage as well as being an obstacle, something that no other enemy does in this game. Mario Bros. Is even the series' first real foray into multiplayer territory, and I'm talking real, simultaneous multiplayer, something that wasn't new in the arcade world, but was always appreciated, as most games would make you take turns with your friends instead of getting to play at the same time. This in and of itself really helps to boost the game's replayability. I mean, games like this are simply more fun to play when you have a friend next to you. Not to mention that this game is also the debut of everybody's favorite Ghostbuster. How's it going, Luigi? What's that? The original Luigi's Mansion just got added to Nintendo Switch Online?
Whoa. Come here. Oh, no. Let's go.
Alright, I guess I'll play Mario Brothers instead. But honestly, that's kind of all I have to say about it. It's not really trying to be anything new or special, it's just a simple, fun little game. Good for picking up for a few rounds here and there, or maybe for hanging out with friends. Either way, that'll be the end of our very first quest here on the show. Congratulations, little Mario Brothers. Now, we're gonna get to your super sequel in just a moment, but before we do that, I've got to show the folks at home something fun. Come on everybody, take a look at this. Ladies and gentlemen, this here is my cartridge shelf. It's looking rather empty at the moment, I know, but that's about to change. As of today, each time I talk about a game here on the show, I'll also be adding it to the shelf. Rest assured, it won't be empty for long. Regardless, that means that Mario Brothers, you have the honor of being our very first quest complete. Alright, and with that out of the way, what do you guys say we get to the real reason we're all here? That's right, it's finally time to talk about Donkey Kong. No, yeah, I'm totally just kidding. You get back in the dungeon, wait for the Donkey Kong videos. No, for real, we're going to talk about Super Mario Brothers. And man, what a remarkably innovative game for its time. One that managed to push new boundaries and helped to launch the international powerhouse that Mario still is today. It's so popular, in fact, that it can be, quite frankly, a little hard to discuss. I mean, everybody knows that this game is good, right? I'm not really breaking new ground there. Regardless, I can't make an entire review show about Nintendo games and not talk about this game. So, let's give this a shot. Super Mario Bros. Was, of course, in part designed by Nintendo's prodigal son himself, Shigeru Miyamoto. Yeah, this is all sounding a bit familiar, isn't it? Well, it's not my fault that the man had his hands in just about everything Nintendo at the time. However, just because he worked on everything, that doesn't mean that he did it alone. Just as Gunpei Yokoi would help to design Mario Bros., this time Miyamoto would have help from Nintendo newcomer Takashi Tezuka, a man that would become so important to the Mario series that he would later go on to direct both this game's Japanese sequel, what we know as The Lost Levels in America, as well as both Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario World. Tezuka in general was sort of Miyamoto's right-hand man around this time. Not only having his hand in the Mario games, of course, but also in Miyamoto's second biggest creation, The Legend of Zelda, where he'd go on to direct the series' debut title, as well as the critically acclaimed A Link to the Past. Oh, and of course, its Game Boy sequel, Link's Awakening. Hey, you know, this game's got a bunch of Mario enemies in it, right? Can I just cover this one instead? No offense, Super Mario Bros., but this is one of my favorite games of all time. Am I right? We got any other Koholinters in the chat? Well, whatever. Back to the video. But before the duo had so much as a thought about mushrooms or Triforces, they actually worked on a title that wasn't released here in America, known as Devil World, a game that, while on the surface shares very little in common with Super Mario Bros., actually included its most famous feature years before it did. Of course, I'm talking about side-scrolling, something Mario often gets credit for creating, despite only popularizing the mechanic. But it's a little bit early to be talking about mechanics. Before we get there, I'd actually like to talk about the story. You know, to sort of ground the game's world and see how everything's going to fit together. The only problem with that is that, well, we're talking about Mario here. This isn't exactly Shakespeare. Regardless, I guess I'll be giving it my best go. Or should I say, let's a go, right? Hey, alright, let's get to that story. You see, this game takes place in the magical Mushroom Kingdom, where you, as the lovable hero Mario, have to save the beautiful princess, as localized in America at the time as Princess Toadstool, strangely enough. Yeah, this game came out in the era where Nintendo of America would just kind of change things for seemingly no reason. What's interesting here, though, is that the big bad, you know, the guy we would later know as Bowser, was actually referred to by his Japanese name first, King Koopa. Or at least he was in the first couple of pages, because by the end, they call him Bowser. Sure, they refer to him as Bowser, King of the Koopa, but still, how odd. It seems like not even Nintendo of America knew what was going on. Like I said, it was strange times. There are a couple other oddities from the manual here I'd like to point out too, like how the species we now know as toads in America are called mushroom retainers. Ugh, I hate that. Another thing that always makes me laugh is this line here, check this out. It reads, Mario, the hero of our story. Maybe. Maybe? What do you mean maybe? What, did Bowser write this thing? It's so strange and weird. Either way, that's about all we're going to get from this game in terms of its story. You gotta remember, this game came out in a time where gameplay was really all that mattered. It's so old, in fact, that Mario is often cited as being the first platformer, even if that's not entirely true. You see, platformers had existed in the arcade since at least 1981, with the release of a game called Jump Bug. Even side-scrolling, which Mario also gets credit for, was actually a thing way before this, in games like Williams Defender. What most people mean to say is that Super Mario Bros. Was the first game to put all these elements together, have them work successfully, and notably release it on a home console. It's easy to forget nowadays, but back in the 80s, arcade games were vastly superior to that of home consoles. For example, the same year that Super Mario Bros. Released in America, we had already gotten games like Commando, Section Z, and Ghosts and Goblins, all of which were way more technically impressive. No, what really made Super Mario Bros. Shine was that it was accessible in your home, on your TV, whenever you wanted it. And that was a big deal in and of itself, but lucky for us, Nintendo decided to go one step further by just making it a damn good game. I look at Super Mario Bros. As a shining example of simplicity done right. The entire charm of this game comes almost entirely from the way that Mario feels. Take his momentum, for example. The way that it builds up slowly as you press the run button, coupled with the fact that he doesn't stop on a dime, really helps you feel his weight, like he's a real object in this world. Mario 1 embodies a series of really small adjustments to the platforming formula that really help it to stand out. And nowhere is this more evident than in Mario's iconic jump. The jump here is simply incredible, and really only for one reason, and that's that it's variable, meaning the longer you hold the button down, the higher Mario will jump. If you just tap the button, he'll only jump a little bit, but if you hold it, he'll go way up into the air. This is definitely one of those things that seems so obvious and so simple, but it's really not. If you've played games that came out before the mid-1980s, you'll know that jumping used to feel terrible. Even Donkey Kong, the game that Mario debuted in, has a fixed jump, meaning there is no variable in height, and once you do it, there's no turning back. You are committed to that arc. In Super Mario Bros., they change it so that you have a lot more control in the air. It's such a small tweak that has such a big impact. We only take things like this for granted today because it's so good that every platformer since has copied it. Furthermore, the jump, not only being your main form of traversal, but also the way that you attack your enemies, is just a great level of cohesion that I love to see. Taking one simple mechanic and milking that to get as much out of it as possible is the key to good game design. The jump is so great that, as I mentioned before, it's kind of become Mario's whole thing. And it makes sense. I'd say it's really half of this game's core value. The other half is something that I think gets less attention, but is arguably just as important. And that's Mario's run. In this game, Mario's a little slow on his feet, but if you hold down the B button, Mario will start to run, doubling his speed. Not only does it aid the slightly slippery sense of momentum that helps to make Mario feel like a real person, but it also just feels good, plain and simple. One of those unexplainable things in video games that's just right. You know, like when you punch a guy and the sound effect is extra crunchy in just the right way, or when a game's visual style is super appealing to the eyes. You can't really explain it, it just makes your brain happy. On top of that, it also functions as a great accessibility feature for those who might want a slower, less heart-pounding experience. Though the option is great to have, of course, it's very clear the developers behind Super Mario Bros. Do not want you going slow. No, this game in every way possible is begging you to sprint through its levels at max speed. To see this in action, look no further than the top right of the screen. You see that number up there? That's a timer. When the number hits 0, you die instantly and have to restart the level, meaning you only have so long to dick around. On top of that, whenever the timer drops below 100, the music actually goes into double time, giving you this frantic go 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 type of feeling. It's great. The music in general is really good at getting your ass into gear. Its high tempo combined with that constant snare beat is perfectly designed to make you want to run. What's also interesting is that this incentive to hurry isn't restricted to the levels themselves. As most people know, this game has warp zones that allow you to skip further into the game. Their primary design seems to be a replacement for a save feature, but in addition to that, they also sort of make the entire game feel like this one giant race for the finish, where you can skip ahead, optimize your run, and play as few levels as possible. Whether or not that was intended by the devs, I don't know. Either way, it certainly adds to the game's replayable kinetic pace. There's a similar case with how the screen will only advance to the right. If you try to go back to the left, the screen will lock and simply won't let you. This is almost certainly a hardware limitation rather than than a design decision, but its existence does prevent you from going back to explore, meaning there's only one way to go and you might as well go fast. The refreshing thing about this high-speed gameplay is that it actually isn't constant, or at least doesn't have to be if you don't use the warp zones correctly. Instead, there are actually other level types in the game that allow you to take a breather and slow things down a bit. Both the underwater levels, and to a lesser extent the underground levels, do a great job at mixing things up here, largely through their choice of music. The underground levels, while aided by that refreshing blue color, do an amazing job at really making you feel like you're deep underground, and the music on top of it just sends that feeling over the edge. The genius of the music here is that they decided to drop the pitch and the tempo, while also making the song more repetitive, tricking your brain into hearing an echo. A super creative way to accomplish something that wasn't possible on NES hardware. The underwater levels also offer a similarly slow-paced environment, largely due to the swaying feeling the music takes on that helps you feel as if you're floating in water. Even better, these levels offer you something else entirely, a cool diversion on the normal gameplay style. In these levels, you're not running and jumping, you're swimming, which thematically sounds different, sure, but the real smart thing here is that it retains that same focus on jumping I mentioned earlier, only now you're a bit more floaty and have to adapt to your new movement style. This is all helped by a few nice touches, like the new aquatic enemies you get, or that little water bubble that leaves Mario's mouth as he swims. Something so simple that a lot of games just wouldn't have the time to do, but somebody on the team decided to include it as a fun little detail, and it goes a long way to help considering that the water doesn't animate and there's no other way to tell that you're there other than the blue color. Something I don't love, though, is getting pulled by these underwater currents. This does not feel good. The concept is fine and all, and I even think it's a good way to increase the challenge underwater in a way that's not possible above ground, but the lack of visual feedback makes it feel less like an intended feature and more like the game is bugging out. Some simple whooshing water lines would have gone a long way to really make this mechanic better. A great example of how mechanics aren't enough on their own. Clear, simple communication to the player is just as important as a good idea, if not more so. Regardless, there's actually only a handful of underwater levels. The level type that appears the most, other than the ground theme, is actually the classic castle level, which appears 8 times at the end of each world. To put it simply, these rule. They offer a nice increase in difficulty while providing a completely different vibe from anything else in the game, really helping them stand out. Despite the graphics leaving a bit to be desired, the simple fact that they changed the look at all for the boss level is admirable and really helps to make them feel special. The music too does a great job in this department. It's foreboding while still matching that high energy feeling of the normal levels, so it still incentivizes you to go fast. Even better, they even have obstacles all to themselves. These levels are filled with those rotating fire bars and those little bubble guys that pop out of the lava. Sorry, side note for one moment, did you know that they're called Podoboos? What the hell is that? How have I never known that? Did you know that? No, you're lying. Regardless, as if those obstacles weren't enough, these levels also introduce these little jets of fire that come in from the right side of the screen, presumably from the big bad himself, Bowser. These aren't particularly difficult to dodge or anything, but they do provide this cool feeling of getting closer and closer to the end. It's a neat way to build tension while also making the level harder at the same time. Once you get to the end, you come face to face with Bowser, and man, his design is great. Well, I mean in the game at least. In the promotional art, not so much. In the game, his size alone is enough to be intimidating, but the spikes on his back and defined teeth really cue you in that this guy means business. If only his boss fight did the same. No, instead, he's actually a bit of a letdown. Not only because he's just a little too simple for my liking, but also I think his design is a bit antithetical to the game's core, which, as I mentioned earlier, revolves mainly around jumping. Now, technically you do defeat him by jumping over him or running under him, so it still does work, but you gotta admit, it would have been loads better to actually jump on him in a real fight, you know, like how you have to hit him multiple times in later games. To make matters worse, you have to fight him 8 times, as he's the only boss in the game. Though to give credit where it's due, they do at least evolve the fight as you fight him, each time adding new blocks or obstacles, and then eventually giving Bowser those dreaded Hammer Brothers hammers, which boy do I really hate those hammer patterns, but we'll save that when we talk about the menace himself, the Hammer Brothers, later on. For now, that's really all there is to level progression. After you beat a castle level, you advance to the next world and start back at the ground theme to do it all over again. And while that's a bit formulaic, sure, the game's hardly long enough for that to matter. In fact, I find it kind of charming. The worlds all fit into this cyclical, repetitive design structure that actually invokes the arcade game design of games before this, like Donkey Kong, which, funnily enough, Nintendo helped to popularize. It's funny how there's still so much arcade DNA even in a game that's trying really hard to break that mold. It really puts into perspective just how old this game is. Of course, that's not to say that Super Mario Bros. Doesn't break out of that mold. No, of course it does. Take the graphics, for example. They're actually really impressive for a console game at the time. The background being this bright blue sky alone was a refreshing and innovative decision in an era where most arcade games were space-themed and thus had that black static background. Even games like Donkey Kong, which took place in a city, opted for the black background, probably because it wasn't worth the resources of actually drawing a color, whereas leaving the background empty simply shows up as black. Here in Super Mario Bros., they go as far as to include rolling hills and bushes that are attached to the ground. Sure, they're simplistic, but the way that they move when the screen scrolls really helps to make these levels feel more like an actual world. Regardless, what really helps to establish the world isn't just the environment, but also the things that inhabit that environment. Luckily, the Mushroom Kingdom is filled with a bunch of different baddies. Chief among these is the first guy you'll encounter, the ever-classic Goomba. This guy is the de facto starter enemy for a reason. He can't jump, he simply walks in one direction, and all he takes is a single stomp to kill. He's a mindless mushroom that can only kill you if you're not paying full attention. He's obviously just there to show you the ropes, and for that, he does his job well. So well, in fact, that I feel like everybody and their dog has already brought up how smart that first Goomba's placement is. But as much as I don't want to beat a dead horse, it wouldn't be a complete Super Mario Bros. Deep dive if I didn't bring it up. If somehow you haven't heard of it, the first Goomba is very cleverly placed to force you to jump over him or die. Now, obviously, you could say this about any enemy in any game ever, right? But what makes this Goomba special is the placement of the blocks above his head. They're placed in such a way that when you jump, chances are you're going to bonk your head against one of these blocks, which also informs the player of a critical action they'll need for the rest of the game. Both the action of jumping into a block and the fact that Small Mario, who you start as, is incapable of breaking them. If you're really lucky, you might even hit a question block, which teaches the player that these things hold valuable rewards inside of them. The other enemies in the game are just as cleverly designed, but in very different ways. Take the Koopa Troopas, for example. They function as a sort of evolution of the Goomba. They still only require one jump to kill and have no other means of attacking you. But what's so clever about them is the shell that they leave behind after you pounce on them. This thing here is a great risk-reward opportunity. You can kick the shell to send it flying into other enemies, annihilating them in a single satisfying series of events that gives you that feeling of knocking over dominoes. But of course, you can also kick a shell directly into a pipe and subsequently into your shins. This forces you to be careful around Koopas and gives their shells this sort of aura of exciting risk. Now, these two are the main enemies you'll be going up against, but there's also a ton more, like Para-Koopas, a slightly harder Koopa variant who bounces, Cheep Cheeps, who are essentially underwater Goombas, and Bloopers, those squids with the infuriating swimming pattern that always seems to trip me up despite them being consistent in their movement. A more interesting enemy would be the Lakitu. These guys float around in their little cloud high up in the sky. That alone already sets them apart from other enemies, but what really makes them cool is that they can spawn enemies themselves. They throw down these little dudes called Spinies, who you can't jump on at all and must be killed through other means, like a shell or the fire flower, which we'll talk about later. What's cool about the Lakitu is that he fills a void in the otherwise sort of homogeneous enemy design of Super Mario Bros., being an enemy who is relatively easy to kill, but can be a total pain in the ass if not dealt with quickly. Their position in the sky also affords the developers some choice of the impact they have on the level. Sometimes they're placed around other blocks, making them an easy target as long as you focus them. Other times they're placed at the start of a level, completely unkillable until you find some higher ground, which makes you get a move on unless you want to be surrounded by an army of Spinies. As an added bonus, it also builds some hype for that moment where you can finally squash him. Dumbass cloud looking ass. However, king among the enemies is the dreaded Hammer Brother. These dudes are jumping, hammer-throwing maniacs, and they're also the worst, mainly because their hammers are so incredibly hard to predict. which is a shame because I love the idea of giving an enemy a long-range weapon. I even love the way they move, how they jump up and down between these different rows of blocks, which provides a more deadly enemy type that requires you to actually use your brain to defeat them, which is so good and such a great idea, and they would easily be my favorite enemy in the game if it wasn't how they behave on flat ground. When they're placed here, it removes any safe way to kill them. You see, when a Hammer Brother's on a block, you can sneak under them, which is still tricky to manage, sure, but doable, since these hammers that they throw are programmed in such a way that they will leave a gap eventually. This allows you to react, sneak under them, and go for the kill, as long as you time it right. Now, that gap still exists when they're on the ground, sure, but the issue is that these dudes love to jump, and they love to do it completely randomly. Or at least as far as I can tell. This means that even if you time the gap perfectly, there's always a chance that that asshole decides to just jump directly into you, killing you in a completely cheap and unfair way. All they need is a tell before throwing that hammer, like a big wind-up or something. Or hell, even just sync their movements better so they can't jump during the hammer gaps, and I wouldn't mind them so much. As is though, they suck. I hate these little bastards. I'd murder all of them if given the choice. That's it, little man. You're going to the Shadow Realm.
Well, that was fun. Let's see, is there anything else to talk about? Oh, I know. How about power-ups? Can you believe we're 25 minutes into a video on Super Mario Brothers and we haven't talked about power-ups? Well, let's take a look and see what we're missing. Now, where's that question block I had? No? No? No. Oh, definitely not. Yeah, ow! Yeah, here we go. Alright, let's just give this thing a little... Looks like first up is the Super Mushroom. Touching this guy will allow Mario to become Super Mario, increasing his strength and, of course, his size, which has the potential to add an interesting new wrinkle to level design. Unfortunately, as cool as a concept as that is, Super Mario Bros. Doesn't really do much to play with Mario's size in quite the way that I wish it did. There are admittedly a few sections where you can slip underneath some blocks, but they're usually short-lived and have very little impact on the level as a whole. One big positive thing you don't really think about is how you start the game as Small Mario, not Super Mario, which would have been a very easy thing to do. Not only does it allow you the excitement of becoming Super for the first time, but it also provides some fun reflection upon losing the power. At first, as Small Mario, you feel completely normal. You have no idea that you can be better and stronger than this. But when you touch that Super Mushroom, suddenly you feel like you could take on the world. You have all this health and you're stronger. But then, oh no, you get hit, and what's this? I'm a shrimp again? It makes you feel weak and vulnerable, pushing you to chase the high of grabbing yet another mushroom. Just like real drugs. Thank you, Mario. But honestly, disregarding the Super Mushroom's function entirely, I just have to comment on its existence at all. Power-ups were obviously nothing new to video games at this point, but I really like the way that this one functions. When a Super Mushroom pops out of a power-up box, it doesn't just sit there. Instead, it scurries around, kind of like a Goomba, bouncing off of pipes and falling into pits. This small tweak does two really smart things. One, it increases the chances that an unwitting player who doesn't even know that they want to touch the mushroom will touch the mushroom, and it also simultaneously adds a fun bit of challenge for those who accidentally miss the power-up in the first place, and then have to chase after it before it falls into a bottomless pit. Which leads into a fun game of cat and mouse, or plumber and fungus, or whatever you want to call it. In a similar way, almost as an evolution of the Super Mushroom, the Power Star does the same thing. You see, when you hit this guy out of a box, it not only runs, but it also bounces away from you, increasing the chances of it getting caught on different blocks, or even ricocheting off pipes and soaring straight back over your head. If you do manage to touch it, Mario will start to flash all these different colors, and a new energizing song enters the soundtrack. Of course, you've got to mention the iconic Power Star theme, which just makes you feel invincible and drives you to kill absolutely everything you come into contact with. A completely different power-up, though, is the Fire Flower, which is my personal favorite. When touching this guy, Mario changes colors and is now able to throw projectile-based fireballs until he's hit again. What's cool about the fireballs is the way that they move. The obvious choice, I think, would have been to make the fireball just shoot out straight from Mario like a gun in Contra or Mega Man. But no, Nintendo gave the fireball a little bit of physics by making it bounce along the ground instead. This does provide some fun situations where you're actually able to sort of snipe enemies on the ground while you're standing safely above them. But to be honest, I mostly just like it because it's fun and quirky.
Regardless of how it works, the addition of a long-range tool completely transforms this game and how you interact with enemies. This is especially the case against other long-ranged foes like Hammer Brothers and enemies you otherwise can't kill, like Spinies. Even Koopas are easier to handle, as hitting them with a fireball makes their shell drop away completely, removing that possibility of killing yourself. Altogether, the power-ups are implemented in a much better way than many other games of the era. I love that you don't just get them for a brief period of time and then they're over, with of course the exception of the Power Star, but I think it's designed around that limitation just fine. Instead, all the other power-ups stay with you until you get hit. This leads to this conflicting feeling where you feel strong and powerful, but also a little nervous, like you could lose your protective shield at any moment. It puts you on the edge of your seat, keeping you more engaged and focused on the game as you have to play a bit more carefully if you want to hold on to those power-ups. If I had to include a small nitpick about the power-ups, I don't like how getting hit as Fire Mario drops you all the way back down to Small Mario. It's not a major thing, but I just think it's a bit too punishing, and I much prefer the system the newer games use where you go down in increments. It just feels more fair to me. But to balance out my nitpick, I'll give you a Nick pick. How about that? Yeah, something seemingly small and minor, but that I like a lot. Like the opposite of a nitpick. Like, did you know that this game has cutscenes? Yeah, and I don't mean the ending of a level or even the ending of a game. No, I mean in between some levels, like this one here, where you go into this pipe and then exit underground. It would have been easy and completely acceptable to just end the level above ground, start the next one underground, no explanation needed. But instead they provide context for how Mario actually got underground. It's neat. I only wish underwater levels got the same treatment by having Mario jump off a ledge into some water or something. So whatever, it's appreciated nonetheless. And with the conclusion of my Nick pick, I think it's about time we conclude this video as well. That, ladies and gentlemen, was Super Mario Bros. A game that I strongly feel deserves its legacy and spot amongst the greatest games ever made. One that values a fun simplicity above everything else and excels in being exactly what it sets out to be. The first truly great side-scrolling platformer. We've been talking about the guy for 40 years, and I'm sure that we'll be talking about him for 40 more. So with that, Super Mario Bros., you've definitely earned your spot on the cartridge shelf. In the wise words of the man himself, let's-a go. Quest complete. Hey there everybody, I just want to take a second to thank you so much for watching this behemoth of a video. If you couldn't tell, I kind of put an ungodly amount of time into it, so I hope you enjoyed your time today. And hey, if you did, that's great because there's going to be a lot more to come. There are a ton of games out there that I really want to talk about. Like I mentioned Zelda earlier, I would love to cover Metroid or Mega Man or I don't know man, there's so many, too many. And if you liked the video, please consider leaving a like. I know that's something you hear all the time and you're just like, yeah, okay, whatever, but I am a newborn little baby of a channel right now. So liking and sharing is just extremely helpful. If you liked what you saw here and want to see me grow, I would really appreciate that. If you want to support me more financially, I did go ahead and set up a Patreon. I hope that's not scummy to do so early, but you know, this does take a lot of time and I have a full-time job on the side. So if I ever want to do these more regularly, money helps. Of course, you never have to donate or anything. Cartridge Quest will always be here on YouTube for free, but if you want to show your support and go that extra step, the Patreon link will be in the description down below. But for real this time, I think that's all I have to say. I will finally give you your free time back. I really appreciate you guys watching this gigantic 35-minute video, and again, hope you had a good time. I'm gonna go get started on Cartridge Quest Episode 2. Again, thanks for watching, and take care.